Number 10. The Devil Made Me Do It. In 1981, 19-year-old Arn Cheyenne Johnson sparked controversy far and wide for a crime he wasn't behind, or so we think. While arguing with Alan Bono over Johnson's girlfriend, Arn stabbed Bono, resulting in the man's death. When police arrived, Arn claimed that the devil made him do it. When the words "the devil made me do it" came from his mouth, it sent the world into controversy. Apparently, Arn was possessed by a demon that had not been vanquished by the Warrens at all. Ed and Lorraine had worked with his family a year prior when Arn's girlfriend's brother David was possessed by not one, not two, but 43 demons. In order to save him, Arn commanded the demons to enter him instead, so when his dark deed finally occurred, Ed and Lorraine flew to his defense. The Warrens stated that at the time of the exorcism, and I quote, "Johnson leapt up and cried to the demon, 'Come into me, I'll fight you, come into me.' But from that time on, he was possessed." The Paranormal Society was split in half, but Johnson's team was committed. The court had defended acts of God in the past, like a lightning strike to a tree hits a car, you know what I mean? And now it was time to defend accounts of the devil. But despite what you believe, it wasn't enough, and Johnson received a maximum sentence but was released after good behavior just 4 years later. But still, the fact that these demons were never truly vanquished left the Warrens terrified that this might be the case elsewhere. Number 9. The Smurl Haunting. Jack and Janet Smurl sound like they should be like the leading couple of a comedy featuring Jennifer Aniston and Jason Sudeikis. But of course, wrong list. The plight of the couple attracted the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren after a series of dark and ominous events struck, of course. In the 1970s, the family started experiencing shocking technical mishaps like their TV bursting into flames and toilets flushing by themselves. I know, do ghosts poop? Apparently. At first, they didn't think anything of it, but then the knocking started, in a peculiar pattern of 3 followed by terrible sudden odors, making the Smurls feel ill. The strange noises and smells were swiftly followed by sightings, and thus entered the Warrens. The Warrens discovered a presence of 3 separate demons, and despite 3 exorcisms, the family reported the return of the demons until finally they let go 15 years later. Number 8. The Haunting in Connecticut. The mortuary turned home for the Snedeker family in Southington, Connecticut definitely created the perfect breeding grounds for a scary story, one that left even the Warrens uneasy in their skin. First off, moving into a mortuary? No thank you. In the 1980s, the Warrens took on the case of Carmen and Al Snedeker, who were being tormented by a series of restless spirits and demons. So in this case, it's not just one, but many that they feared. The family reported the smell of rotted flesh lingering in the house because, I don't know, it was a mortuary, and that the taps would turn red out of nowhere. The eldest son was plagued by visions of ghosts, and both Carmen and Al reported being sodomized by the ghosts. It's a very specific activity. Which led to the Warrens making the discovery that whoever the morticians were, their activities were not always professional, if you get my drift. I don't know what's worse, the demons themselves or like the people who used to live there. Ugh, can't handle that. This was one of their most confusing cases and remains under scrutiny to this day, but the Warrens knew whatever it was had to be exorcised. But the question is, was it really, or is it just hiding out until someone else comes along? Number 7. The Enfield Haunting. I don't know what it is with the 70s, man. It just seems like so much weird stuff happened. We had serial killers. It's nuts. But it just seems like it's one of the strangest times in history, what with violent killers and violent hauntings. The Enfield haunting took place in Brimstown, England, and remains one of the more boggling cases the Warrens worked on. Peggy Hodgson and her family claimed to have seen furniture and toys being thrown and moved by unknown forces in their homes. They even claimed that violent voices were heard and that their children were levitating in the air. They caught the photo of the girls levitating when the investigators set up a wired control camera into the room, which periodically caught images throughout the night. Whatever it was, the Warrens knew there was a demonic entity within the house and immediately set to work. Number 6. The Perrin family case. The Perrin family lived in the old Arnold estate, which inspired the scariest film I have ever seen, personally, because if you've watched me on Central Dark, you know how low my tolerance is. But anyway, it's still awful. Yeah, you know it, you've heard of it. 8 generations of families lived and died in the old house and apparently never wanted to leave, or never could. When the Perrin family moved in the 1970s, the advice they got was to leave the lights on always. Why didn't you leave then? I don't know. I don't know how that didn't send them running for the hills. The house had been rife with tragedy, but one of the 3 people who took their own lives was an alleged Satanist whose activity was responsible for the possession of the house. Her name was Bathsheba Sherman, who became a demon that Lorraine will never forget. The demon would physically attack the daughters of the Perrin family, with one reportedly seeing a floating head screaming and retching at her. Ugh, I almost didn't say her name, but I did, so we'll see what happens to me now. Number 5, the Shadow Doll. The Shadow Doll is literally the doll of your nightmares. The Shadow Doll comes from unknown origins but was kept in the Warrens Museum for safekeeping. But what we do know was that it was used for satanic rituals, and that the thing is doused in black magic and contains human and animal bones. Whatever possesses this thing had the Warrens take it into their possession to ensure that it caused harm to no one else. Legend has it that if you take a picture of the doll, it will possess your nightmares. But it won't just be any nightmare. It will be the most terrifying you've ever experienced, and some have even suffered heart attacks from them. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't they just burn the thing? Well, what's more dangerous? A demon you can see right in front of you, or one free to wander wherever it chooses? Honestly, I take the spider approach with this. If you see the spider, you know where the spider is, you're good. As soon as the spider disappears, burn your house down. Number 4, Valak. This one is a little controversial because was it just made up for the films? We don't know. Valak is a real demon mentioned in the Lesser Key of Solomon that was introduced into the Conjuring series of films. Though her direct involvement with Lorraine and Ed is under debate, Lorraine's belief in the demon was very strong. Valak is referred to as the Great President of Hell, and usually chooses to appear as a small winged, 2-headed creature thing resembling a child. Valak is said to command 30 legions of demons, and in the film became the leading arch nemesis of the Warrens. We'll mention Borley Church in a second, but Valak was portrayed as a nun. But there is some speculation that says that they may have actually encountered him throughout some of their worst cases. Lorraine often said that she encountered a black, shadowy vision of a dark entity whenever she wasn't working on a case, and believed that she was being followed by something she couldn't explain. Want to know more? Stay tuned until the end of the video and make sure to like and subscribe while we're here. Number 3, Borley Church relates to Valak. We'll talk about this in a second. The grim history of Borley Church is the perfect setting for a horror film. The land upon which it is built used to be the home to a 14th century monastery, where a monk fell in love with a nun at a nearby convent, which led to the monk being hanged, and the nun was bricked up alive within the walls of her convent, which sounds pretty friggin' extreme if you ask me. It sounds like evil resided there long before Ed and Lorraine made the trek out to sort out whatever demon lay between its walls. Whoever did that to those 2 poor people, ooh, that's awful. This case inspired the famous nun apparition, as I mentioned, as the youngest daughter of the family who settled there reported seeing her figure. She was also pushed and slapped hard enough to leave welts behind, and that was just in the 1800s. When Ed and Lorraine visited, they obtained photo evidence of the hauntings. Ed captured the image of a monk leafing through one of the books at the altar, and Lorraine experienced a black entity rush past her. Valak. She remembered feeling an overwhelming sense of evil. A picture revealed later showed that the shadow of a nun was rushing past her, so that's where the image came from. So was it Valak? We don't know. Number 2, the Annabelle doll. You knew. Probably the most famous of the hauntings conquered by the Warrens was the Annabelle doll. It would almost be a crime not to mention it. Dolls are already eerie with their black, piercing, beady eyes that look like there's nothing there. But in this case, the most terrifying part was the thing behind it. The case dates back to the 1970s when a Raggedy Ann doll was innocently purchased from an antique store for her daughter. Soon the doll began raising alarm when it would change positions in the house, boggling its owners. But when the notes started showing up saying "help me" and "help Lou," then they came home to find it covered in blood, and they decided then that they needed to call a professional. The first medium they called in said it was just the spirit of a girl who passed away, but then the owner, Angie's boyfriend, was attacked. Enter the Warrens. They knew the doll was in fact a demon based on the marks of the beast, and and other encounters. They removed the doll and took it home, vowing not to take the highway, concerned that whatever was within the doll might cause an accident. Indeed, their brakes stalled or failed several times on their way home, putting their life in jeopardy several times. It wasn't until Ed doused the doll in holy water that the problem desisted. The couple was so concerned about the doll that Ed routinely said a prayer over the doll every single night. Alright, number 1, the Amityville horror case. The setting: Amityville, Long Island in 1975. A place rife with satanic manifestations set on driving whoever entered to violent madness. As soon as I even say Amityville, you know where this is going. One of the most famous Warren cases, this haunting continues to land on the conclusion that there are just some things that can't be explained. A year before the Lutzes moved into the suburban home in Long Island, Ronald DeFay Jr. shot and killed the 6 members of his family. So it's no wonder that during the first month of living there, the Lutzes experienced swarms of flies, loud banging noises, disturbing entities, and even levitations. The Lutzes moved out and left all their belongings behind, and George Lutz, the father, an ex-Marine and karate expert, so clearly a tough guy, wouldn't even meet the Warrens at the house. He met them at a Pizza Hut. He was that scared. The Warrens said that this case affected their personal relationship to each other the most out of any case they've worked on. This entity followed the Warrens home the very first day, and Lorraine described being incredibly fearful. There was something she just couldn't explain. To this day, Lorraine says that this is the case that haunts her the most, and said, and I quote, she hoped that this was as close to hell as she would ever get.
Starting off this countdown, we have the toy monkey. You may recognize this little demon monkey from the Conjuring universe. It made a little cameo in the movie Annabelle Comes Home. Anyways, apparently this monkey is possessed by a demon that enjoys stalking its victims before murdering them. That is absolutely horrifying. Why isn't this more well known? Now, there is good news to this. Apparently it's no longer haunted. It was blessed by them and now stored safely in their museum. But before it was blessed, they told no one about this demon monkey. Coming in at number 9, we have the other dolls. And if you guys are liking this video so far, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. So the Warrens have a number of creepy ass dolls that are possessed by demons, not just Annabelle. Let's take a look at some of these terrifying dolls. First up, we got this lovely doll with no mouth. Not gonna lie, it looks like a kid's paper mache craft. But that hair looks a little too real. Let's hope it's not. Then we have this doll. I didn't think we could get any worse, but whew, I was wrong. Okay, her eyes are horrifying. They literally just stole my soul. And last but not least, we got this gem. Because who doesn't love clowns, am I right? All of these dolls are apparently haunted by different demons. But that's all we know about them. The rest is a mystery. Moving on to number 8, we have the succubus demon. Succubus is a demon that is said to take the form of an attractive female in order to trick and seduce men. It's common for men to be visited by this demon in their dreams. While investigating the Smurl family haunting, Ed came in contact with a succubus demon. Both Ed and Lorraine tried to remove this demon from the Smurl family's home, but actually failed to do so. That's when they had to call in Pope Benedict XVI for help. And they performed a ritual exorcism of the house. Maybe that's why we didn't know about this, because the Warrens failed at removing the demon and needed help. That must have been pretty embarrassing. In our 7th spot, we have the haunted house. The Borley rectory is said to be one of the most haunted places in England. It was built in 1862 but sadly was damaged by a fire in 1939, and by 1944 the whole thing was demolished. Now here's the thing. Before it was demolished, it was said to be extremely haunted. People would hear footsteps and see ghostly apparitions of a nun and a phantom coach. In fact, when Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the church, this is when she encountered the real-life demon that inspired Valak. While there, she also saw a headless demon monk walking around that left cryptic messages on the walls. And also, they saw ghostly nuns walking around at night. That's when the Warrens hired a bunch of photographers to help capture evidence of these demons. They ended up encountering the ghost of a nun, or demon nun. She was a real-life woman that got buried alive in the brick walls after having an affair with a monk. So there were multiple ghosts and demons at this church that the Warrens encountered, which were not publicized by them. Fun fact though, the Warrens kept a brick from this demolished church in their museum, because why not, you know, memories, a little souvenir. In our 6th spot today we have the Pearls of Death demon. This simple pearl necklace is said to be one of the most dangerous items in the Warrens museum. And honestly, it's the most beautiful. Doesn't it make you just want to pick it up and put it on? Well, don't, ever. This necklace is incredibly cursed and is said to strangle anyone who wears it. Basically, it all started when a woman was given this necklace. She put it on and claims that it felt like someone was strangling her to death. People around her had to actually yank the necklace off of her to save her. It was a near-death experience. It's believed that this necklace was used in incantations or rituals, or even was used as a holy relic to Satan worshippers. So now it's possessed by some sort of demon that wants to kill anyone who wears it. The Warrens again chose not to go that public with this necklace, because it might tempt people to visit the museum and put it on for themselves. And obviously they don't want people dying at their hands. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Union Cemetery Ghost. Now this one is a bit different than the other ghosts and demons on today's list, and that's because the Warrens kept this ghost a secret because it was fake. There wasn't actually a ghost. Let me explain. So according to a legend, there's a lady in white that haunts Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut. She was apparently the victim of betrayal by her lover, and she died either by taking her own life when she was heartbroken, or she was actually killed by her lover. Well, Ed was determined to capture her on tape, and enlisted his secret, not so secret lover, Penny, for help. So in the summer of 1990, Ed apparently camped out in the cemetery for a week trying to make contact with this ghost, and it was a fail. The two then faked a video of the lady in white, which was just Penny wearing white. Anyways, he went on to make great claims that he made contact with this ghost, but hardly any evidence was provided, just a few shadow ghosts on video, which was Penny. People were questioning the authenticity of this video, and he kinda was like, hey, let's just, forget about this, and then they just never talked about it again. Coming in at number 4, we have the Donovan family. In the 70s, the Donovan family was haunted by a very malevolent demon. It started off how it normally does. The family would hear loud noises coming from inside their walls. Eventually, things would happen like blood would pour out from their taps, and they would hear animalistic growls coming from within their house. The Warrens were sent in to investigate, and turns out that the daughter, Patty Donovan, used an Ouija board and was communicating with the spirit that claimed it was a young boy. Clearly, it was a demon in disguise as a young boy. After learning that, the Warrens called for a priest and they exorcised the house from evil. But how come this case wasn't as well known as the others? Why were they trying to keep it a secret? Seems suspicious. What were they hiding? In our 3rd spot, we have the Antonellis. This is another innocent family that was terrorized by evil. It all started back in February of 1966, when the Antonelli family started experiencing some paranormal visitors. Miss Antonelli was the first to see it. She was about to doze off when she got a feeling that someone was in the room with her. She opened her eyes and saw a massive gray mist with 4 distinct appendages. She turned on the light and the figure disappeared. For years, this figure tormented her and no one believed her. That was until it started tormenting her husband, and he was all like, WTF is going on? The house really is haunted. Sorry sweetie, but I believe you now. I don't know if he actually said that, but it probably was something along those lines. Anyways, the Warrens were eventually called in and they conducted a seance. That's when they discovered a number of dark things happened at that house. Some of it was so disturbing that it's believed they wanted to try and keep this case a secret because of the home's gruesome past. Apparently a young girl became pregnant by a neighbor. Her baby was then killed and buried in the cellar. That's just some of the dark things that happened there that the Warrens were willing to share. Moving on at number 2, we have the Exorcism gone wrong. In the early 2000s, Ed and Lorraine Warren traveled to Japan to check out these so-called haunted tunnels, where a number of people mysteriously died in. But they got more than they bargained for, because while in Japan, they were called in to do an exorcism on a young girl named Teresa. There was a demon inside of her fighting to take control of her body. In fact, Teresa didn't speak a word of English, but during the exorcism, she spoke fluently. The leaked footage of the exorcism shows Teresa trying to fight back against the demon, but a number of people don't think it went too well. Even if you Google the case, no information comes up. So many fans believe that poor Teresa lost her life to this demon, which is why the Warrens kept this a big secret. And in our number one spot today, we have the Shadow Doll. I'm gonna start by saying that Annabelle looks like nothing compared to this doll. Seriously, its appearance alone is horrifying. Way creepier than that Raggedy Ann Annabelle doll. Anyways, according to the Warrens, this doll was used in a number of satanic rituals. In fact, the doll itself is composed of human and animal bones and black magic. Then, one of the rituals went wrong, or went right, because the doll became possessed by a demon, and it's super powerful. Rumor has it that if you take a picture of the doll, then it will latch onto you and visit you in your dreams. The dreams will be so bad that you'll either have a heart attack and die, or never want to sleep ever again. In fact, according to the Warrens, this demon doll has been responsible for a number of deaths. So the doll was first for sale in an antique shop, and a couple decided to buy it. I'ma stop myself right there. I don't know what possessed this couple to buy the doll. Probably the demon possessed them and convinced them it was a good idea, because who the hell would look at this thing and be like, huh, that's a great little fun-loving doll, isn't it cute? No! Anyways, the couple began to experience intense and horrifying nightmares. They later found out that they were having identical nightmares, and one night the husband woke up with huge gash marks on his back. They linked this all back to the doll and got rid of it. Now, since this demon is so powerful, the Warrens obviously didn't want to tell people about it, because then the media would go on a frenzy and take photos of it, and then the demon doll would curse all them. So they hid it away in their museum for as long as they could.
For 10, we're starting off strong with the Devil Made Me Do It case. If you're a fan of Ed and Lorraine, you know this one. The Devil Made Me Do It case is arguably one of the most famous cases that Ed and Lorraine ever worked on. But beyond the supernatural, this case was right in the public eye. Not only were there demons and the supernatural, but the scrutiny of the public eye made this a whole different monster for the Warrens. A bunch of people outside of the courthouse making claims and threats over the case isn't easy to deal with. When 19-year-old Arn Cheyenne Johnson took the life of his landlord and blamed it on the devil, Ed and Lorraine jumped to his defense. They were convinced a demon had entered him after he tried to save his brother from a vicious possession a year earlier. His younger brother was possessed by 43 demons, and Arn commanded that they leave him and enter him instead. The Warrens fell under immense scrutiny, but according to them, the court had defended accounts of God in the past. Now it was time to defend accounts of the devil. But one thing remains strange to me. Arn was never exorcised after the event. Does that mean they are still with him? Number 9. Highgate Cemetery. Where were they for the vampire hysteria at Highgate Cemetery? Like, where were you? When I learned about this case, I was flabbergasted, and it's weird to me that they weren't there. They've dealt with werewolves but missed out on vampires completely? The Highgate Cemetery in London, England has some of the oldest graves in the world, making it the perfect breeding ground for ghosts, ghouls, goblins, and vampires. Ooh, it's spooky season. The Highgate vampire case caused a media uproar in the 60s that culminated in two magicians facing off to see who could catch the vampire first. It all started when two girls reported seeing the dead rise from the graves while walking through Swain Lane one night. Soon, animal carcasses drained of blood started turning up. Newspapers had their cameras ready. A massive vampire hunt was organized on Friday, April 13th, in 1973, and bodies were even exhumed from their graves to see if they were toothy. Sadly, no one caught anything, but the case still sends a tingle down the spines of vampire enthusiasts around the world. Legends of the demon, though, continue, along with sightings of a crazed old woman and corpses appearing in places they shouldn't be. Number 8. The Bell Witch. I searched the internet far and wide to see if the Warrens had ever visited the Bell Farm, but alas, no. If I'm wrong and I missed something, post a link down in the comments, because I'm not perfect and maybe I missed it. But as far as I can see, they never actually checked out one of the most famous hauntings in the world. 200 years later, the Bell Cave remains an attraction and many still report hearing a shrill, scratchy voice when no one is around and see orbs surrounding the farm, or where it used to stand. Though the actual events happened well before the time of the Warrens and the farm was torn down, the Bell Cave was still there. If there was any duo who could have proven the tale of the Bell Witch, it was them, but maybe, just maybe, they were afraid of what they might find. Number 7. Michael Taylor. The Michael Taylor case is one of the strangest I've ever come across while doing lists like this, and it certainly needed Ed and Lorraine. The horrifying events of Michael Taylor happened in the 1970s, specifically 1974. A man who was considered a good husband, father, and community man suddenly flipped. He began enduring bouts of severe depression and was visiting a 21-year-old pastor named Marie Robinson for counsel. His wife was obviously suspicious, but the sessions were helping. Mary allegedly performed many exorcisms on him to expel the demons. Taylor's wife was getting pretty antsy, and they ended up having a confrontation during which Taylor attacked his wife. It was after this moment Taylor resolved to undergo a full-blown exorcism on October 5th, 1974. During this, Michael had seizures, he spit and bit the ministers, and screamed in tongues. Unfortunately though, it did not expel all the demons, and Taylor returned home in a rage. He took the life of his wife in an incredibly gruesome way, and was later found screaming in the street naked and covered in blood. I don't think the Warrens ever encountered anything as violent, but imagine if they did. Number 6. Richard Gallagher and Julia. Richard Gallagher is a man I find entirely fascinating because his transition from being a man of science to a full-on believer of the occult is, for lack of a better word, insane. Now obviously the Warrens had their domain, but imagine if these guys collaborated on this case? What? Though, I don't know if Gallagher needed help, just saying. The case I'm referring to is when Gallagher encountered a transformative possession. Gallagher became the go-to guy to diagnose people who claimed to be possessed. An Ivy League psychiatrist, he would help those who were mistaking mental illness for something mystical. Julia was the first time he encountered someone he couldn't explain. Julia was the queen of a satanic cult and had become possessed, which she desperately wanted to be rid of. Skeptical at first, but when Richard sat down to talk to her, she knew intimate details about his life. Objects would fly off the wall, and once during a phone call with the priest, they both heard one of the demonic voices she'd speak in around them, even though Julia was across the country. Number 5. The Thornton Heath poltergeist. It was the 1970s. Thornton Heath, England. Where were the Warrens? Probably busy, or too scared to bother with such a terrifying case. It all started one hot August evening when the family living in the house was awoken by their radio suddenly blaring to life. This was just the beginning to a terrible haunting the family would endure for 4 years. Objects would fall or be thrown across the room by invisible hands, you know, all the usual poltergeisty things. One night, the son awoke to find a man standing at the end of his bed, like staring at him with like venom in his eyes. After a bunch of startling incidents, they tried to have the house blessed, but it failed. However, a medium did discover that the house was haunted by a couple named the Chattertons who considered them trespassers on their property. The family eventually had no other option but to move out, and the activity has since ceased. But imagine if the Warrens were on the case, probably would have been solved so much sooner. Or not, who knows. Number 4. The Danny poltergeist case. In 1998, a woman named Jane Fishman reported strange happenings regarding an antique bed in the home of Al Cobb in Savannah, Georgia. It was a vintage 1800s bed that Cobb bought at auction for his son, a purchase he later regretted. 3 nights after it was purchased, Jason, the son, told his parents that someone was watching him on the bed. He felt cold breath on his neck and saw the impressions of elbows dipping into the pillow. He also noticed the photo of his deceased grandparents lying face down on the dresser, which became a reoccurring event. After he put it back up, it'd fall back out. But then, one morning, an assortment of strange objects including animals made from shells was found on his bed after he'd already gone down to breakfast. That got his parents and his twin brother's attention. They left paper and crayons out and asked the ghost what his name was. Then later they came back to see Danny 7 written on the paper. After several communications and a smashed terracotta planter, it was clear that Danny didn't want anyone in his bed. The family eventually got rid of the bed, but that didn't solve the problem. Turns out Jason's connection to the spirits went skin deep, and he continued to see things after the event. Number 3! Here we go! the Winchester house. This place is on my bucket list to visit, so it's a wonder to me why the Warrens never checked it out. Again, I googled it, they didn't. Prove me wrong in the comments. I welcome correction, as always, thank you. But it's essentially a 24,000 square feet mansion with 10,000 windows, 2,000 doors, 160 rooms, 52 skylights, 47 stairways and fireplaces, 17 chimneys, 13 bathrooms, 6 kitchens, and cost Sarah $5 million to build, about $71 million today. There are stairs and doors that lead to nowhere, windows that don't open. It's a labyrinth of mystery. Sarah Winchester and her husband William Winchester amassed a huge fortune from their sale of the, you guessed it, Winchester rifle. After her daughter died of TB and William left Sarah a widow, she consulted a medium who told her that she would constantly be haunted by the spirits killed by the Winchester rifle. The house never stopped construction until she died in 1922. It is said the house was built to trap the spirits inside. Today, it's considered one of the most haunted places in the world and is well worth a visit for anyone seeking a scare. So where the heck were the Warrens to debunk this thing? It would have been awesome. Number 2, the Amityville horror case. Obviously I had to put this case on the list because this case remained the scariest event of Ed and Lorraine's career.
It had the monstrosities of the night which roamed that house, which infested it, which caused a young man to murder his whole family.
The events at Amityville, Long Island in 1975 shook the nation and the box office. The Lutz family moved into their dream suburban home with optimism and hope for their life. But little did they know, a year earlier, Ronald DeFia Jr. shot and killed all 6 members of his family, priming the property with evil. The Lutzes didn't know what to make of the swarms of flies, loud, aggressive banging noises, disturbing entities, and even levitations occurring in the home. So they got the hell out of Dodge, leaving all their belongings in the process. When they finally called the Warrens in, George Lutz, the father, who was, by the way, an ex-Marine and karate expert, literally supposed to be fearless, wouldn't even meet them at the house. They met at a Pizza Hut. But as soon as the Warrens began working on the case, they understood why.
The Amityville case affected our personal lives more than any case we ever worked on.
To this day, Lorraine says that this is the case that haunts her the most and said that she hoped this was the close to hell as she would ever get. So if that's not too scary, I don't know what is. And now we are getting to number 1, the Warrens. Demons, poltergeists, and ghosts. It was hard to find a case that the Warrens wouldn't face. They seemed fearless, their love strong enough to withstand all the forces of darkness, or at least that's how the movies told it. It turns out that the real case the Warrens were too afraid of was the horrifying truth of their marriage. Yup, we're going there. If you're a fan of the movie franchise, then you know that Lorraine had a lot of influence on the stories up until her death, but a weird detail in her contact alludes to some nefarious activity in their personal life. Neither Ed or Lorraine Warren could be depicted violating anyone or performing adult acts with a minor. The reason that was in there might have something to do with the case of Judith Penny. Penny stayed with the Warrens as a young woman and allegedly had an inappropriate relationship with Ed, and Lorraine knew about it. Judith made a legal declaration in November 2014 stating that Penny and Ed had begun an amorous relationship when he was her bus driver and she moved in with them in 1963. That same year, Penny was arrested when someone noticed the illegal relationship between her and Ed. Why she was arrested and not him remains in question to me, but Penny also stated that Ed was abusive towards Lorraine, saying, and I quote, "Sometimes Ed would actually have to slap her across the face to shut her up. Some nights I thought they were going to kill each other." Lorraine denied the allegations through representatives, and there are still a lot of loose ends. Number 10, the Keg Mansion in Toronto. This one's for me. I'm so sorry. But here it is. Tell anyone in Toronto that you're going to the Keg Mansion for dinner. Be ready to receive the... You know it's haunted, right? Because they will do that. They will do that. Because it is. I have been there on several occasions and I can verify that heading to the upstairs girls' bathroom alone is a harrowing journey. The haunting goes back all the way to 1915. Before it was the Keg, it was the home of industrialist Hart Massey and his family. Legend has it that the Massey's daughter Lillian passed away and her maid was so distraught over her death that she took her own life. That's one theory. Others say that she committed the act to avoid the dread of her affair with Massey being revealed. Either way, the ghostly image of a maid hanging by the neck has been seen multiple times by employees, I have friends who work there, and guests alike. It's been a keg since the 1970s, and Ed and Lorraine never visited, neither for business or pleasure. There are either two reasons for this: they were too busy, Or the idea of a ghostly apparition appearing mid-bite didn't sound very appealing to them. How do you like your spirit? Rare or well done? Number 9. The Myrtles Plantation. This 18th century plantation, along with a 600-acre land, carries with it a dark past. Perhaps it's due to the fact that no one was living in it as to why the Warrens never visited, but the haunting itself is pretty terrifying. Though only one person was confirmed to have been killed on the property, with the history of slavery surrounding the estate, the number is estimated to be a lot higher, as we can probably guess. One of the most famous ghosts who reportedly walks the ground is that of Chloe. Chloe was a slave who poisoned the birthday cake of the daughters of Clark Woodruff to take a small kind of revenge on her awful masters. She apparently didn't intend for the girls to die, only to fall ill, but alas, they died. When they did, her fellow slaves were so fearful of Woodruff finding out that they hung Chloe for her crimes. This tale has fluctuated over the years, but the verified murder was that of William Drew Winter, who was shot on his porch and reportedly crawled back into the house, climbed to the 17th step on the stairs in time to die in the arms of his love. Both tales have sparked sightings of spirits on the ground, and in Winter's case, visitors reportedly see and hear bloody footprints crawl to the 17th step and then stop. Had the Warrens visited the property, they could have potentially confirmed what spirits remain restless on the property, but alas, we will never know. Number 8. Villisca Axe House. Adding to this list of properties that make you want to run away is the Villisca Axe House. The story goes as follows. On June 10, 1912, Josiah and Sarah Moore, along with their children, were bludgeoned to death inside their home, but no one knows who did it. It is one of America's most infamous cold cases, and the home remains preserved exactly as it was, except for the bodies, obviously, though many report that their spirits remain. The Warrens never charged for their work. They simply liked helping people because go Warrens. But the people who now run the Haunted Museum have no problem charging their visitors. The house remains a tourist attraction and there's a steep price to pay should you wish to stay the night. Besides the $400 fee, it may cost you your life. Allegedly in 2014, a paranormal reporter stayed at the house, and at 12:45 in the morning, the owners got the call. The man was found covered in stab wounds, which authorities later reported were self-inflicted. The Warrens risked their well-being all the time. So my theory is that the investors were the ones that kept them away because they didn't want to scare the ghosts away because they were making them so much money, but, you know, it would have been nice to hear their thoughts. Number 7. Los Feliz Mansion. Have you ever entered a room or building that immediately gave you like the heebie-jeebies, like something in your gut was screaming at you that you weren't supposed to be there? Well, that is the exact feeling people encounter when they stand outside this mansion. On the night of December 6, 1959, Dr. Harold Perelson snapped and took the life of his wife and eldest daughter before he took his own. His two youngest managed to escape after their eldest sister screamed. He was a successful doctor with a happy family life, so no one knew why this happened. Some blame financial issues after one of his investments failed, but one creepy factor was that a passage from Dante's Divine Comedy was left open on his bedside table like a note. Ever since the event, people report an overwhelming feeling of foreboding that prevents visitors from entering. It was used as a storage unit by a family who purchased it 2 years after the event, but it was never lived in again. Number 6. The Jean Harlow Haunting. It sounds like bad luck followed all those who lived in this home. You may have heard of old Hollywood actress Jean Harlow and her horrendously abusive husband, Paul Byrne. In 1932, Byrne took his own life while standing in front of a mirror, though some believe foul play since the butler who found him called MGM Studios first, not the police. Byrne's ex-girlfriend jumped off a boat to her death days later, so there was some speculation if it was her. Jean moved out, but died later at the ripe age of 26, super young. So as you can tell, that house did not have good vibes. But then, in 1963, Jay Sebring bought the house with his then-girlfriend, Sharon Tate. Tate in a couple interviews recounted events in the house that creeped her out, such as the appearance of a short man, probably Byrne, staring at her in the master bedroom. She also saw a shadowy figure hanging with a slit throat in the hallway. Creepier still, Tate and Sebring would later fall victim to the horrendous and horrific Charles Manson massacres. Tate was the same age as Harlow when she died, also a really creepy coincidence. Something dark clung to whoever lived in the house and is still presumed to be haunted to this day. Number 5. 455 Sackett Street. When you think of a haunted house, a specific image appears in your brain. It's either a farmhouse or a mansion, there's really no in between. But you would think we would hear more about haunted apartment buildings since there is a large turnover, which is perhaps why the haunting of 455 Sackett Street didn't get as much attention. This place was riddled with unexplained fires, ominous feelings and sudden drops in temperature, and family tragedies. Everyone who lived there experienced dark things. What with the history of the building being riddled with insidious affairs, mob hits and dealings, and grim attacks, bound to happen. Jane, one of the women who lived there, once had a friend see a little boy in burnt rags staring at her. This event proved even more terrifying as after the woman moved out, the apartment was renovated. Within the walls of her apartment, they found a corpse fitting the above description, tucked inside the walls. So if you are ever in Brooklyn, don't request an in-person viewing. The Warrens never did. Number 4. Hotel Monte Vista. We all know the idea of a place being haunted is enough to lure in guests, but if guests can't even make it through the night, then there's a problem. And they needed the Warrens, but they never showed up. The Hotel Monte Vista opened as a community hotel in 1927, and soon a history of opium dens, tragic affairs, mob dealings once again, and secret gambling swelled around the place, as did their paranormal reputation. The hotel has become known for its ghostly sightings, such as in room 220. A long-term boarder had a strange habit of hanging meat from the ceiling in that room. I don't know why the hotel let them do that. And the lodger himself was found dead 3 days after his death. The TV allegedly changes channels on its own, and the sheets have been found torn to shreds. In room 210, the small voice of a bellboy announcing room service can be heard, though no one appears. John Wayne even experienced this. In room 306, the corpses of 2 women of the night were thrown over the balcony. Guests who stay there report feelings of being suffocated by hands while they sleep. Staff are plagued by sounds of infants crying in the basement and have been seen running to escape the sound. The list goes on and on. Perhaps it was more the money machine that kept the Warrens away, but it would have been cool to hear their take on the hauntings. Number 3. Poveglia Island. There are many reasons why the Warrens never visited this island, the number one being that it's so freaking terrifying it's actually illegal to visit. It's also in Italy, though they traveled all the time, so what's the reason? Poveglia Island plays host to over 160,000 violent deaths, from being a hospice for victims during the bubonic plague, then an asylum run by a mad doctor. The tormented past of the island has no limits. The story of the doctor on the island is the most menacing though. He performed cruel and malicious experiments on his patients, but their souls took revenge on him and allegedly drove him mad. So mad that he tried to throw himself off of the clock tower. And witnesses say that on the night it happened, a mysterious mist consumed the island. Those who decide to take a boat and venture as close as possible to it report hearing screams and moans that chill the bones. Even creepier, people report hearing a bell toll from across the bay, even though it was removed years before. Scientists who have studied the strange happenings of Poveglia have identified an electromagnetic field that surrounds the property, but there's no electricity to the island, so what's the reason? Number 2. The Dandy House. This may have been a job too big for the dynamic duo. A dream home turned nightmare, the Dandys experienced some of the most terrifying encounters since the Bell Witch. I said it. Clara and Phil Dandy lived in this house along with their kids in the 1970s and endured all kinds of encounters, from disembodied voices to footsteps racing around the house. It's a wonder they stayed as long as they did. The creepiest thing I saw described is that once they witnessed strange faces watching them through the windows. When Mr. Dandy ran outside to confront them, first of all, brave dude, badass, mad respect, the faces were looking out at him from inside the house. From there things got worse. Some of the things even sounded like aliens. They saw floating white specters and half animal, half human creatures watching them. Objects flew around the room, one lamp barely missed one of their daughters. They involved clergy and Ed and Lorraine to help clear the house, but even they couldn't rid the house of whatever possessed it. In fact, whatever they did made it worse. It got so bad, the Dandys ended up leaving the house after nothing worked. And last but not least, the Mothman in number 1. The legend of the Mothman, alien, angel, or demon. Described as a tall, half-man, half-bird-like creature with glowing eyes, the Mothman even has skeptics unsure of what to say. The most famous groupings of sightings occurred between November 15th, 1966 to December 15th in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Prophetic in nature, sightings of the creature are often followed by tragic events such as the Silver Bridge disaster. The aforementioned bridge collapsed on December 15th, which coincided with the last sighting of the creature. 46 people passed away, and because sightings ceased after this, people believe he was an angel of death of sorts. More recently, sightings of the Mothman started taking place in 2011 in Chicago. I know the Warrens strictly dealt with demons and possession, but considering how mystifying this whole event was, it would have been interesting to hear what they had to say. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have The Conjuring. To start off this list today, of course, we have to talk about the case that really started a lot of our more modern interest in Ed and Lorraine cases, and that would be the Conjuring house. The house, which was built in 1736, wasn't anything special and didn't gain its fame until the family of Roger and Carolyn Perron moved in 1971. They claimed to experience terrible things like the smell of rotting flesh, witnessing something levitate in their beds as they slept, and one of the family members even claimed to have been possessed by a spirit. The family, of course, called Ed and Lorraine to come and investigate and hopefully help them out. Once there, the pair claimed that there was in fact a spirit haunting the home, and it was that of Bathsheba Sherman, who is said to have been a witch who previously lived in the house and who was buried in a cemetery nearby. The investigators had to make several trips to the house over the span of a few years, but as of now it is said that the house belongs to new owners who continue to open their doors to paranormal investigators. In our number 9 spot today, we have Annabelle. Many of us are likely quite familiar with Annabelle due to the movies made about the haunted doll. As it turns out though, they truly are more than just movies, as the real story is said to have taken place in the 1960s. This is at least when Ed and Lorraine began to get involved with the doll. In 1968, two roommates claimed that the Raggedy Ann doll that was gifted to one of them by their mother had become possessed by the spirit of a young girl named Annabelle Higgins. After further investigation by the pair, the Warrens explained that the doll was being manipulated by an inhuman presence, and they knew that the roommates would not be able to keep the doll without fearing for their safety. This is what led to the pair taking the doll and placing it in their occult museum. In our number 8 spot today, we have Amityville. One of the cases that is perhaps the most famous of Ed and Lorraine's is that of the Amityville haunting. In the 1970s, couple George and Kathy Lutz contacted the paranormal pair because they claimed that their house was haunted by some sort of violent demonic presence. They said that this presence was so intense it forced them to have to leave their home. Considering the dark history this home had just before the couple had moved in, it wasn't necessarily a stretch to believe that the house was haunted by some sort of evil spirit. In the end, the Warrens investigated the home and backed up claims that the Lutz had, which is part of the reason why this case ended up launching its own multi-million-dollar franchise afterwards. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Enfield poltergeist. In 1977, the Warrens were called to Enfield, which is said to be a North London suburb, over reports of some poltergeist activity. Many people claimed that the reports of the hauntings were a hoax, but when the Warrens conducted their investigations, they became convinced that the hauntings were a result of demonic possession. The claims said that the house had furniture that moved on its own, there were disembodied voices being heard throughout the halls, and just general haunting things that nobody would want in their home. In the end, this case was so famous, it's actually what went on to inspire the story that was seen in The Conjuring 2. In our number 6 spot today, we have The Devil Made Me Do It. This is the Ed and Lorraine Warren story that is behind the 2021 Conjuring movie. We've got a lot of fucking Conjuring movies on this list. In 1981, Arn Johnson was accused of taking the life of his landlord, Alan Bono. Ed and Lorraine had been called to the house prior to this taking place because the family believed that the younger brother of Arn's fiance had been possessed by a demon, but when the paranormal investigations began, Ed and Lorraine claimed that Arn was also possessed by some sort of demon. The trial of Alan's killing ended up marking a point in time, as it was the first time demonic possession was used as a not guilty plea. In this case, it was unsuccessful, but it went on to be one of the most historic cases of Ed and Lorraine's. In our number 5 spot today, we have the werewolf. Okay, I'll be honest, this is one of the more controversial Ed and Lorraine cases, but still, we had to talk about it. Ed and Lorraine claimed that they were able to exorcise the angry spirit of a werewolf from a man named Bill Ramsey, who is said to have turned into a sort of wolf man. The Warrens did not perform exorcisms themselves, so of course they needed to get some help from priests as well, but they claimed that the treatment worked. Lorraine explained that she saw Ramsey's case on TV and just felt like she could help him. She even claimed to have a video of this guy transforming into the werewolf creature, but conveniently never released it to the public. The Warrens were so involved in this case that they brought Bill from England back to Connecticut in order to be exorcised by a bishop that they knew and trusted. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Union Cemetery. The Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut is known as one of the most haunted cemeteries in the United States, which definitely says a lot. The most famous of all of its hauntings is a presence that is often referred to as the White Lady. There are many people who have experienced this ghostly presence, and many people have seen her walking in front of their cars as they drive near the cemetery. That is all exactly why, in 1990, the Warrens decided to experience it for themselves when they set up their cameras in this haunted location. It is said that that just after 2:40 a.m. they heard the sound of weeping and a paranormal figure began to move several feet in their direction. It is said that as they witnessed this, Ed tried to slowly approach her, but she suddenly vanished just as quickly as she had appeared. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Smurl house. In August of 1973, the Smurl family had moved into a new home in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, but things quickly took quite a dark turn. The family began to claim that their new home was possessed by some sort of a demon that caused loud noises and bad odors, and whatever this entity was, it was doing some really violent things to the family, as well as to their pet dog. This went on for years before they decided to call in the pros. Of course, Ed and Lorraine were on the case. According to Ed, there was a demon that inhabited the home and it was very powerful. It had the ability to shake mirrors and other items of furniture, and they began trying to persuade it to leave by playing religious music and praying. Apparently the Warrens, while in the home, witnessed a drop in temperature which was followed by the formation of a sort of dark mass. There was another instance where they claimed they saw the demon leave a message on a mirror that read, "Get out." In our number 2 spot today, we have The Haunting in Connecticut. If you've ever seen or read The Haunting in Connecticut, this is a home and a story that you might be a little familiar with. In 1986, the Snedeker family moved into a new rental home that at one time had previously been a funeral home. In the basement, the family found some less than welcoming items that were left from the home's previous life. Shortly after moving in, however, their discoveries would become more gruesome as they began to have reports of evil coming from the house. These included attacks on the family members, seeing apparitions, and they even explained violent personality changes from one of the family members. When Ed and Lorraine investigated the house, they were able to confirm that it was in fact haunted. It is said that one of the most frightening things that took place in the house, aside from the rumors of possession, was one day when a family member was mopping the floor and all of a sudden the water suddenly turned blood red. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Donovan family. In the early 1970s, the Warrens were called to the home of the Donovan family, and when they arrived, they found them all terrified. They witnessed loud pounding and other inhuman noises coming from inside of the walls. The wallpaper was peeling and the water was running red. The Warrens began their investigation, and this included asking them questions to try and find out if there was a source for the haunting, such as a recently passed away family member or some kind of new secondhand item that they had inherited. Through this questioning, it was revealed that one member of the family had used a Ouija board and ended up contacting someone who said that they had died in the neighborhood 10 years earlier. The Warrens knew it was time for them to call a priest because they believed that the entity that had been reached through the Ouija board was actually a demon that was just posing as the person who had passed away. Following an exorcism, it is said that things in the home slowly returned to normal, but the events stayed with the entire family. One member who witnessed the hauntings and the exorcism said, quote, "I nor anyone else in my family have ever before witnessed anything so weird and terrifying." Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Leslie. Leslie was a 19-year-old student who was attending college in Hartford when she encountered the Warrens. Leslie came from quite a well-off New York family, but in the end she came to the Warrens for help because she was experiencing these unexplainable bouts of depression and anger, and she wanted to see them resolved. She actually, in the beginning, only met with Ed, and when she did, she explained to him that she had previously called upon demons and even the devil himself in order to help her win the love of a boy back home. Apparently, this worked. She had won the boy, and now Satan was on the way to claim her soul, which is why she needed the help of the Warrens before it became too late. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Borley Church. This is the story that is behind the inspiration for the terrifying movie The Nun, so buckle up because it's a good one. This story takes place when the Warrens went to Essex in order to investigate claims of the haunted Borley Church. The tales involved ghostly chanting, organ music being heard when no one can be seen playing, as well as the ghosts of both monks and nuns roaming around the area. It is said that these hauntings started because in one of the past lives of the area and the building, it is said that a nun was buried in the walls alive after attempting to run off with a monk. I gotta be honest, if that was me, I'd haunt that place forever too. The Warrens are said to have made a series of visits to Borley, and in regards to their very first visit, Lorraine apparently said that it was a phenomenal experience. She spoke about how there was a reporter who was also there to cover the story, and this reporter was particularly skeptic about the reports. Suddenly, this reporter began feeling ill and was struggling to breathe. Later that night, after listening to a tape
tape recording of the event, it is said that a disembodied female voice could be heard repeating the words, "Hit him, hit him." In our number 8 spot today we have the vampire. This story is said to be that of a sort of possession, which I honestly wasn't expecting. It is said that the subject in this case, who isn't named, began to have an interest in the occult because of a sort of curiosity with morbidity and death. This then led to her starting to practice satanic rituals, which, listen, we can all express ourselves how we choose, but just be careful, you know? Because for this woman, these rituals led to a bloodlust. She soon found herself waiting outside of cemeteries and dark places, trying to find a young man to prey upon. She would then bite them, like what you'd expect a vampire to do, but it is said that these bites were only to satisfy her craving and hunger, and that the bites were never serious. I'm just saying, serious injury or not, it's pretty messed up. It is said that during her interview with Ed Warren, the woman confessed to having bitten 16 different people this way. In our number 7 spot today we have Satan's Harvest. This is the story that is said to be behind the book Satan's Harvest, and it involves someone named Maurice Theriault, who is also known by the nickname Frenchie. He was a farmer, and it is said that he had 2 personalities. One was kind and friendly and warm, his neighbors loved him, some members of his family loved him, but there was another side of him that was dark and cruel and twisted, and this was seen towards specific members of his family. Ed and Lorraine came to investigate, and it is said that chaos ensued. They claimed to see him bleeding from his eyes, they found crosses that would just appear on his body, and even messages written on his back. In our number 6 spot today we have West Point. This story starts out when Ed and Lorraine were called to a military academy in West Point, New York. When the couple arrived, it is said that Lorraine could sense what was going on. She felt the presence of an Irish cook named Molly. She explained that Molly was a bit clumsy and messy, but this wasn't the only presence, however. The officers at the academy would complain about a ghost moving objects around their living quarters. It was later identified as a ghost named Greer, which, after some research, turned out to be quite eerie. This is because it is believed that this ghost might have been that of Lawrence Greer. This man was a Buffalo soldier until it is said that he turned into a killer. Here's the really creepy part though. I mean, as if being a killer isn't creepy enough. It is said that after Greer's trial, there's no record of what happened to him. In our number 5 spot today we have the Ouija board. This story is one that Ed Warren told when he was trying to set an example of how things of the occult and the supernatural certainly are not for amateurs or for the faint of heart. He used this story of a girl who was playing with a Ouija board. You know, how all good supernatural stories start. She asked for proof of a spirit presence, and she got a lot more than she bargained for. Warren said, quote, "She got this proof with 2 days and 2 nights of hell." Apparently it started off with a manifestation of a sort of animal form walking on her bed. This then turned physical, and whatever this entity was left her with bruises. It is said that thankfully the mother in the home saw what was happening and she took action. She not only prayed by the girl's bedside, but she also sprinkled holy water. There was a 2-day vigil in which everyone tried to rid the girl of this demonic presence that she had summoned, and thankfully, it worked. In our number 4 spot today we have The Beginning. We talk a lot about the most famous cases of the Warrens, like the ones that inspired the Conjuring movies or Haunting in Connecticut or The Nun, but what we don't really talk about is how the Warrens got into the occult. I mean, most people, especially in their day, don't just wake up and suddenly go, I think I'm gonna dedicate my life to the paranormal. So something must have happened to pique their interest. Well, apparently for Ed Warren, it started at quite a young age. It is said that Ed realized at only age 5 that his house was haunted. Apparently he witnessed a glowing orb and a terrifying woman's face coming out of his closet. I mean, that would be horrible to see as a grown adult, I can't imagine at that age. But it fully makes sense as to why he later became so interested in the things that he did. Before Ed and Lorraine became the names that they are today, it is said that in order to help the pair get a foot in the door, literally into haunted homes, Ed used his passion for painting. He used this by painting homeowners' pictures of their houses. Clearly, something he did must have worked. In our number 3 spot today we have the Lindley Street haunting. This is a case that the Warrens were involved in back in the 70s. A couple named Gerald and Laura Goodwin had adopted a girl named Marcia a few years prior to this case and the strange occurrences taking place. There were a bunch of weird things that started happening, including furniture moving, seemingly of its own accord, as well as a crucifix flying off the wall, again seemingly by some sort of invisible force. What really drew people into this case specifically, and what made it so sensational, was the number of people who had reputations of being reliable, who also claimed to witness these strange occurrences. It is said that some people claimed to even hear Marcia's pet cat speak. One reverend even claimed to see the cat singing Christmas carols in the basement. But let's be honest, while that would be very jarring, that's also one of the funniest things I've ever heard. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Antonellis. The story of this haunting starts off with Mrs. Antonelli, who in February of 1966 claimed that while everyone else in the house was sleeping, she saw some sort of apparition. She explains that it was a mass of grey mist that had 4 distinct appendages, and she said it was bright and looked as if it was in sort of a bubble. No one, including her own husband, believed the things she had seen until a year later. It was at this point that one day, while Mr. Antonelli was home alone, he suddenly, out of nowhere, heard a quote ungodly scream, and when he looked in the direction that it came from, he saw the stairs in his house, but suddenly they appeared as if they went on forever. He sat down, had a few coffees and cigarettes, like I think anyone would after seeing something like that, and after he thought it was over and he went back to the housework that he was doing, but he certainly was not right. Basically, it said that he put the hammer down about 7 to 10 feet away from the top of the stairs, and then all of a sudden the hammer came flying down them. He went to grab it, put it down again, and this time it suddenly flew right over his shoulder. It is said that when his family came home, he was still a ghostly white, and this time he had 2 cigarettes in his mouth. From here, it is said that many other family members would go on to also experience very strange and unexplainable occurrences. It is said that for the Warrens, even in their long and full careers, this was one of the most interesting cases that they ever investigated. In our number 1 spot today, we have the theater haunting. Starting in Willimantic, Connecticut, the Warrens went out to check out a theater that was said to have a number of strange apparitions and weird sightings. The manager is said to have been 32 at the time, and he had also recently started working there when he saw the figure of a woman late one night after he had already closed down the theater. He saw the same figure the following night, and this led him to confide in one of the employees who had been there for years about what he was witnessing. This is when the employee said that from the balcony one night he had seen 2 actors in a Shakespearean dress. One of them fell exclaiming, "They've killed me," and then all 3 of them disappeared. This wasn't the only employee either. The janitor also experienced strange happenings and sometimes even heard footsteps. The Warrens decided to conduct a seance in the theater. Ed apparently reported that, quote, "The girl whom the manager had seen came to us and explained she had been murdered after she witnessed the killing of a man. The spirit said she knew she was dead, but she was afraid to, quote, pass over to death because, quote, they were waiting for her." There was of course a medium present at the seance, and it is said that this medium called upon spirit guides to help the girl, but she refused. The Warrens left this case saying that the girl's spirit was still earthbound and that she remained in that theater. I wonder if she's still there. Does anyone know? Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Antonellis. The story of this haunting starts off with Mrs. Antonelli, who, in February of 1966, claimed that while everyone else in the house was sleeping, she saw some sort of apparition. She explains that it was a mass of grey mist that had 4 distinct appendages, and she said it was bright and looked as if it were in sort of a bubble. No one, including her own husband, believed the things she had seen until a year later. It was at this point that one day, while Mr. Antonelli was home alone, he suddenly, out of nowhere, heard a quote ungodly scream, and when he looked in the direction that it came from, he saw the stairs in his house, but suddenly they appeared as if they went on forever. He sat down, he had a few coffees and cigarettes, like I think anyone would after seeing something like that, and after he thought it was over and went back to the housework he was doing, but he certainly was not right. Basically, it said that he put a hammer down about 7 to 10 feet away from the top of the stairs, and then all of a sudden the hammer came flying down them. He went to grab it, put it down again, and this time it suddenly flew right over his shoulder. It is said that when his family came home, he was still ghostly white and this time had 2 cigarettes in his mouth. From here, it is said that many other family members would go on to also experience very strange and unexplainable occurrences. It is said that for the Warrens, even in their long and full careers, this was one of the most interesting cases that they ever investigated. In our number 9 spot today, we have The Devil Made Me Do It. Before I dive into this one, guys, please don't forget to like this video, hit that thumbs up button, button if you're enjoying it so far. This is the Ed and Lorraine Warren story that is behind the 2021 Conjuring movie. In 1981, Arn Johnson was accused of taking the life of his landlord, Alan Bono. Ed and Lorraine had been called to the house prior to this taking place because the family believed that the younger brother of Arn's fiancée had been possessed by a demon, but when their paranormal investigations began, Ed and Lorraine claimed that Arn was also possessed by some sort of demon. The trial of Alan's killing ended up marking a point in time, as it was the first time demonic possession was used as a not guilty plea. In this case it was unsuccessful, but it went on to be one of the most historic cases of Ed and Lorraine's. In our number 8 spot today we have The Conjuring. Of course we have to talk about this case because it is the one that really started a lot of our more modern interest in Ed and Lorraine cases. The house, often referred to now as the Conjuring House, was built in 1736, and it wasn't anything special and didn't really gain its fame until the family of Roger and Carolyn Perron moved in 1971. They claimed to experience terrible things like the smell of rotting flesh, witnessing something levitate in their beds as they slept, and one of the family members even claimed to have been possessed by a spirit. The family of course called Ed and Lorraine to come and investigate and hopefully help them out. Once there, the pair claimed that there was in fact a spirit haunting the home, and it was that of Bathsheba Sherman, who is said to have been a witch who previously lived in the house and who was buried in the cemetery nearby. The investigators had to make several trips to the house over the span of a few years, but as of now it is said that the house belongs to new owners who continue to open their doors to paranormal investigators. In our number 7 spot today we have Leslie. Leslie was a 19-year-old student who was attending college in Hartford when she encountered the Warrens. Leslie came from quite a well-off New York family, but in the end she came to the Warrens for help because she was experiencing these unexplainable bouts of depression and anger, and she wanted to see them resolved. She actually in the beginning only met with Ed, and when she did, she explained to him that she had previously called upon demons and even the devil himself in order to help her win the love of a boy back home. Apparently she had won the boy, and now Satan was on the way to claim her soul, which is why she needed the help of the Warrens before it became too late. In our number 6 spot today we have Amityville. One of the cases that is perhaps the most famous of Ed and Lorraine's is that of the Amityville haunting. In the 1970s, couple George and Kathy Lutz contacted the paranormal pair because they claimed that their house was haunted by some sort of violent demonic presence. They said that this presence was so intense it forced them to have to leave their home. Considering the dark history this home had just before the couple had moved in, that includes the lives of the family who lived in the house before being taken, it wasn't necessarily a stretch to believe that the house was haunted by some sort of evil spirit. In the end, the Warrens investigated the home and backed up these claims that the Lutzes had, which is part of the reason why this case ended up launching its own multi-million-dollar franchise afterwards. In our number 5 spot today we have The Vampire. This story is said to be that of a sort of possession, which I honestly wasn't expecting. It is said that the subject in this case, who isn't named, began to have an interest in the occult because of a sort of curiosity with morbidity and death. This then led to her starting to practice satanic rituals, which, listen, we can all express ourselves how we choose, but just be careful, you know, because for this woman, these rituals led to a bloodlust. She soon found herself waiting outside of cemeteries and dark places trying to find a young man to prey upon. She would bite them like what you would expect a vampire to do, but it is said that these bites were only to satisfy her craving and hunger, and that the bites were never serious. I'm just saying, serious injury or not, it's pretty messed up. It is said that during her interview with Ed Warren, the woman confessed to having bitten 16 different people in this way. In our number 4 spot today we have West Point. This story starts off when Ed and Lorraine were called to a military academy in West Point, New York. When the couple arrived, it is said that Lorraine could sense what was going on. She felt the presence of an Irish cook named Molly. She explained that Molly was a bit clumsy and messy, but this wasn't the only presence, however. The officers at the academy would complain about a ghost moving objects around their living quarters. It was later identified as a ghost named Greer, which, after some research, turned out to be quite eerie. This is because it is believed that the ghost might have been that of Lawrence Greer. This man was a Buffalo soldier until it is said that he turned into a killer. Here's the really creepy part though. I mean, as if being a killer isn't creepy enough. It is said that after Greer's trial, there is no record of what happened to him. In our number 3 spot today we have Union Cemetery. The Union Cemetery in Easton, Connecticut is known as one of the most haunted cemeteries in the United States, which definitely says a lot. The most famous of all of its hauntings is a presence that is referred to as the White Lady. There are many people who have experienced this ghostly presence, and many people have seen her walking in front of of their cars as they drive near the cemetery. That is all exactly why, in 1990, the Warrens decided to experience it for themselves when they set up cameras in this haunted location. It is said that just after 2:40 a.m. they heard the sound of weeping, and a paranormal figure began to move several feet in their direction. It is said that as they witnessed this, Ed tried to slowly approach her, but she suddenly vanished just as quickly as she had appeared. In our number 2 spot today, we have the origin story. We talk a lot about the most famous cases of the Warrens, like the ones that inspired the Conjuring movies, or Haunting in Connecticut, or The Nun, but what we don't really talk about is how the Warrens got into the occult themselves. I mean, most people, especially in their day, don't wake up and suddenly go, I think I'm gonna dedicate my life to the paranormal, so something must have happened to pique their interest, right? Well, apparently for Ed Warren, it started at quite a young age. It is said that Ed realized at only age 5 that his house was haunted. Apparently he witnessed a glowing orb and a terrifying woman's face coming out of his closet. I mean, that would be horrible to see as a grown adult, I can't imagine at that age, but it fully makes sense as to why he later became so interested in the things he did. Before Ed and Lorraine became the names they are today, it is said that in order to help the pair get a foot in the door, literally, into haunted homes, Ed used his passion for painting. He used this by painting homeowners pictures of their houses. Clearly something he did must have worked. In our number 1 spot today, we have The Haunting in Connecticut. If you've ever seen or read The Haunting in Connecticut, this is a home and a story that might be a little familiar. In 1986, the Snedeker family moved into a new rental home that at one time had previously been a funeral home. In the basement, the family found some less than welcoming items that were left from the home's previous life. Shortly after moving in, however, their discoveries would become more gruesome as they began to have reports of evil coming from the house. These included attacks on the family members, seeing apparitions, and they even explained violent personality changes from one of the members. When Ed and Lorraine investigated the house, they were able to confirm that it was in fact haunted. It is said that one of the most frightening things that took place in the house, aside from the rumors of possession, was one day when a family member was mopping the floor and all of a sudden the water suddenly turned blood red.